Hi, John. Thank you so much for coming to the show and taking the time out. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. You're super busy. I know, lawyers always tend to be
No,
working
no,
long hours.
lawyers are never busy. We're full of free time with, sitting around twiddling our thumbs, waiting for the phone to ring, nothing to do. So this is fine.
That's all right. Yeah, most of the time I talk to lawyers, they're super busy. Few of them working 14 hours, 18 hours a day.
I don't do that anymore. There were
Mhm.
times in my career when I did, when I was a younger lawyer and had less control over my own schedule.
Yeah,
And there's certainly times there's emergencies that come up. Certainly, if I have to be in trial for a case, that is, a 15 plus hour a day job when you're actually actively in trial or prepping for trial. But on the day to day, I try. I try to keep a fairly regular
yeah.
schedule. I got two kids, two teenage kids that won't be in the home for too much longer. I have a seventh grader and a 10th grader. So I got, 2.5 years left with one and a few more years left with the other in the house. And so I early on in my career, I made it a priority to make sure
Mm,
that I was home for dinner with my family every day.
yeah.
That we would have that time to me was sacred. That we would have that time around the dinner table to sit, talk, decompress, catch up, whatever. And there have been very few exceptions in my career that I was forced to break that promise to myself. So
Yeah, that's great. I love that. It's the same with my family. I tend to work 4 or 5 hours a day, rest 2 3 hours doing the podcast. So I make sure I give the time to my family, my newborn child as well. And the family comes first, to be honest. End of the day, the money you're making, the business you're building, what is it for? It's come down to a family, isn't it?
yeah, I mean your legacy, my legacy. I think legacy um, should be defined by the family, the mark you made on the people that came into your life,
Yeah.
and when it's my turn to pass off this earth, whenever that may be.
Hmm.
Hopefully, I got a few decades left to go, but whatever it is, it is. I hope my goal is that my tombstone says he was a great dad and he was a great husband,
Yeah.
and not that he was a great lawyer. Because I mean, I think I'm a great lawyer, but that's not what I don't choose to be defined by what I do for a living. I choose to be
Yeah.
defined by the mark I leave on the people that I care about. So
Yeah. I totally respect that. Yeah, that's great. So, the topic we chose to today, and we're going to discuss about golden rules of treating employees better. So, before we get to the topic, our audience and me would love to know more about you, how you get into being a lawyer and employment law, and also being an entrepreneur, how your all journey started.
all of the above. I'm not sure how I actually ended up being a lawyer. I've been practicing law. It's been so long. I've been practicing law now for almost 25 years.
Wow.
And I think, like, if you asked my parents, they would tell you that given in my younger days, my propensity to argue everything with them,
Mhm.
they would tell you I was probably always destined to be an attorney. And in in school growing up, I did like the mock trials and the Model United Nations and the debate team and that kind of stuff. So I think I was always and my interests always lied more in the social sciences, history.
Yeah.
I always like to read and write, and so I think that's where my interest always kind of leaned towards. And then when I got to college, I mean, law school was probably always on my mind, but then I chose for my studies in university history and philosophy, which are two things. I mean, I was qualified to teach about
Right.
the past or
Yeah.
sit under a tree and think about the past, and there wasn't much else I was qualified to do. And so, since you don't make a whole lot of, I said earlier, money's not the most important thing, but while you still need to support yourself, and it's hard to
Yeah.
do that if you're just sitting under a tree thinking about stuff. So, I chose law school and have no regrets. It's a great way to make a living.
Mhm.
The competitive aspect of the law and the sometimes not so nice aspects of being an attorney, I think, are far outweighed by the rewards that the career has brought me for the last 25 years. I have always been an employment lawyer. I
Mm,
represent businesses, traditionally smaller to mid-sized businesses, so less than 1,000 employees is my sweet spot. Although I have in the past represented companies bigger and don't not opposed
yeah,
to it. Just my practice tends to lend towards the smaller business, and I've always represented businesses around that size in their employment relations, human resources, employment law related needs. So my practice really kind of divides itself nicely in half. Half the time, I wear what I call my outside in-house counsel hat. So I
mhm,
represent businesses that don't have an in-house attorney, don't have an attorney kind of on their payroll full time
yeah,
uh, to give them advice. And so I'm the voice on the other end of the phone when a company needs to hire someone, fire someone, uh, have a policy drafted, investigate a complaint of harassment or some other
yeah,
internal complaint of some misconduct, an employee needs a medical leave, whatever. And some of the companies I work with are so small to the point they might not even have an HR department. They might have like a financial officer or a comptroller that
yeah,
is kind of handling the HR function. And then the other half of my practice is a litigator. So I go into court and defend discrimination lawsuits, harassment lawsuits, when employees feel they've been unfairly paid or incorrectly
mhm,
paid, um, thefts of trade secrets and confidential information. Really, any claim an employee can bring against a current or past employer.
yeah,
I'm the guy going into the courthouse to defend the company.
yeah. That's great. So, like, you had already planned out in the early age, like you wanted to be a lawyer. So there's no like a internal or external force onto it, like normally the parents does.
No, I think that was probably always the destiny for me from an early age.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
now I'm trying to talk my kids out of it now. My daughter just started my 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 15-year-old just started doing. She's a musical kid,
yeah.
like an arts kid, and has always done like the theater productions. She's been in bands and does theater and other stuff. And at the school she goes to, your options in spring semester, or two of the options in spring semester are
Mhm,
the musical theater production or mock trial. And you really can't do both because they go on at the same time and they're both very time intensive. And she
yeah,
surprised me this year by choosing, she was the lead in the musical last year as a freshman. And this year she decided to do mock trial instead of auditioning for the musical. And I was pleasantly surprised. And I've had some time kind of it's been nice to kind of work with her through some of the legal issues, kind of coach her up a little bit. I was
yeah.
in talking to her team after school one day last week, and I think we'll go back and do that again as they're getting ready for their competitions. That's been it was a pleasant surprise for me that she went that route.
Yeah, that's great. So get into like today's topic, which is golden rule of treating employees, which you going to discuss about it. So before we do that, like I want to ask you, like you've been working with a lot of employees in terms of like discrimination and the bosses not treating them right. Sometimes like the employees not treating their employer right. So in comes to this one, like what does it actually mean, like golden rules of treating employee right?
Yeah, it's I, I I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. Like I said,
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 25 years. And one of the things I've learned in defending companies in employment disputes for 2.5 decades is that
Hmm.
most companies are trying very, very hard to do the right thing by their employees.
Right.
They get caught up often in this maze or morass of laws and regulations they don't understand, which is what ultimately I think gets them in trouble. But most of them, I think, um, come at this with good intentions and their heart in the right place and whatever
Yeah.
whatever idiom you want to substitute in there. I think that as employers think through, what do we do with this employee? How do we handle this employee? Um, uh, what is this legal? Is this not legal? Is this going to get us in trouble? Is it not going to get us in
Hmm.
trouble? I think if they kind of removed the umbrella or envelope of the law, because the law can be, I mean, I went to school for 3 years and I've been doing this for 25 years, and it's
Yeah.
intimidating, and people get very intimidated by, what the law says. Is this legal? Is it not legal? Do I want to call my lawyer who bills me at X hundreds of dollars an hour? And do I want to get a bill for something and to answer this question for me and whatever? If they would just remove themselves completely from that situation and just ask themselves, if I was the employee,
Yeah.
right? If the roles were reversed, how would I want to be treated in this situation? Would I think I was being treated fairly and reasonably and equitably and equally? And if the answer to that question is yes, then it's probably a good decision to make, a good decision to execute on. And in a very, very, very high percentage of instances, it's going to work out fine. The
Yeah.
employee will be happy with the decision. And if they're not happy with it, they'll at least understand where it came from. And the chances of that decision devolving or destructing into dispute, lawyers involved, lawsuits, courts, etc., I think is significantly lower than if the employer didn't ask itself that question first.
Yeah, interesting. So what do you see like in comes to like what type of dispute you see from like employees to employer? Like the harassment or like what sort of things?
Well, let me give you, I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples, kind of contrasting.
Yeah.
One from an actual case that happens, not mine, but an actual court case that happened, and one from my life, kind of pre-attorney. And I'm using these examples because one of the issues that we've seen here in the States a lot over the past couple of months, and it's an issue that's come up more in the last 3 months than combined in my first 25 years of doing this, is the issue of accommodating employees' religions. And it's come up around the context here in the States around the COVID vaccine.
Right.
To give you the kind of big, kind of 40,000 foot view of this one issue of American employment law. So it's illegal in America to discriminate against an employee because of his or her religion. And going along with that, you have to reasonably accommodate an employee's sincerely held religious belief.
Yeah.
And so lots of employers that are now telling their employees, we're requiring you to get vaccinated as a condition of your employment. Employees are coming back and saying, well, it's against the COVID vaccine's against my religion.
Yeah.
You have to accommodate my religion. And me and employment lawyers all over the country have been dealing with that issue a lot. So I bring up these two examples I'm going to tell you because it's an issue that we've been dealing with a lot for the past few months. So there was a case, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago out of the southwestern Pennsylvania area involving an energy company that had traditionally used time clocks to track time and attendance for their employees. Like you would walk into the facility and you'd have a clock with a punch card, and Fred Flintstone style, you'd slip the card into the clock, and the pterodactyl would punch the time on the clock, and so they decided that was an archaic system they wanted to get rid of, and so they switched to a biometric hand scanner, where you would, instead of slipping a card in, you would hold your hand up to the scanner, and it would read the handprint, and it would identify you as you, and then track your time and attendance that way. An employee genuinely believed that using the hand scanner would impart he thought it was satanic and would impart the mark of the beast on him if he used that to track his time and attendance.
Wow.
He went to the company and said, this is against my religion. I think this is a satanic device. It's going to label me with the mark of the beast. I'll never get into heaven. Can you please provide me another way to track my time and attendance every day? Company said no. Company, I think, probably behind the scenes, I don't think they actually laughed in his face, but behind the scenes probably laughed at the guy and thought that was a silly request, and nobody could really believe that. And if they do, we think it's nuts. And so they denied his request. He went to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency that enforces our civil rights laws in the workplace. They ultimately filed a lawsuit on his behalf, and the company, at the end of the day, the company lost to the tune of over $500,000 they had to pay this guy
Wow.
because he ultimately lost his job because he was
Yeah.
showing up as absent every day because he wasn't using the system. So that's example number one. Example number two, when I was in high school, I worked at a fabric, like a fabric wholesaler. We
Mhm.
took in, my job was the trucks would pull up and I would go onto this like, 55-foot long semi trailer, and I
Yeah.
would unload giant bales of fabric. And that was my job for the summer. And then other people would take those bales of fabric and take customer orders, and they would cut them down to size and then ship them out to the customer. Okay. So this was the summer before I started college. And I had worked there for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. And one of the employees, one of my coworkers comes up to me and he says, has Harland talked to you yet? And I said,
Mhm.
I've spoken to Harlan, but I don't know what sure. I've talked to him. And he goes, no, has Harlan spoken to you yet? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. And
Right.
he said, all right. He said, here's the deal. He goes, Harlan is like a religious nut, and he has a lot of really far out there ideas. And so your best bet when Harlan corners you, which he does to everybody, just kind of politely nod, and whatever he gives you, just take, and then throw it out during your lunch period and just go about your business. And sure enough, later that day, Harlan came up to me in the
Mhm.
warehouse with some literature to tell me how the Freemasons ruled the world from a secret office on the 35th floor Rockefeller Center. And there was the secret society of elders that ruled the world from this Freemason sect, and how Lee
Yeah.
Iacocca saved Chrysler by making a pact with the devil, and all this kind of weird, crazy stuff. And I nodded politely and took his literature and then
Yeah.
threw it in the garbage can. So a few weeks later, Harlan was out sick for the day, and somebody in the warehouse who was a really good artist um, took a pen and drew a very accurate drawing of Lee Iacocca, who was the former chairman of Chrysler, on Harlan's
Mhm.
desk. And Harlan believed that he had saved Chrysler by this pact with the devil, and drew on his desk this really good picture of Lee Iacocca with the words, "Harlan, I'm watching you." And Harlan came back the next day and just flipped out because he thought that Lee Iacocca had come up from the bowels of hell and had
Yeah.
burned this thing onto his desk. And so he went to management and said, "I can't work at this desk anymore. I need a new desk." And um, I use these two stories because think about with the energy company that rejected the employee's request and said,
Yeah.
no, you got to use we can't give you a time clock. We can't give you a pen and paper. You got to use this hand scanner.
Mhm.
This company looked at Harlan and said, okay, took his desk, moved into a closet, brought him a new desk, problem solved. And so
Yeah.
it's um, path of, whether you call it path of least resistance, or is this an issue worth making a big deal out of, or is this something simple we can provide for an employee, or just if you were Harlan, how would you react if the company said, no, you have to work with this satanic desk? If Harlan
Yeah.
genuinely, and he really believed that Lee Iacocca surfaced from hell and etched this on his desk, it is, that for the cost of 30 seconds of manpower in moving one desk out, moving another one in, they
Yeah.
save themselves potentially, either an employee resigning and having to fill that position, or years of expensive heartache through litigation that they probably would have lost because the fix was so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true though. It's like everyone got their own beliefs. Some believes on different things, and we should respect that because no one actually got forced to into it. Like you have to follow them kind of rules. The rules is fine, like in work-wise, but don't go into something like a personal. So when you go into like a personal, you're doing the reputation of your company, the person, and their belief as well. So that's going to discrimination, which is the next level. And also, it is really hard. Like you can't change other people. Someone's working on your company, you didn't buy that. They're just working for the hours, and they're not like a slavery, like a 400-500 years back used to be. Right now,
Yeah,
like everyone go right. Yeah.
people want to go to work. By and large, people want to go to work, do their job, get paid, and be
Yeah.
left alone. I mean, that's what people want, and it's where that lack of respect, I think, gets injected in there that creates a
Mm,
lot of the problems. And we've seen that, I mean, so much surrounding the pandemic over the last
yeah.
over the last, particularly over the last few months, once the vaccines rolled out, and it's, at least here, it's become a very politicized issue. People look at it and say, the government's not going to tell me what to do, or big pharma is
Yeah.
not going to tell me what to do, or what, or people that, or there are people who believe, like Bill Gates is injecting,
Yeah.
5G transmitters into people's bodies with the
Yeah. Heard that. Yeah.
whatever nonsense. But for employees that come to you and say, I genuinely, like, my body, my temple, I genuinely believe it is a violation of my religious rights if I take this,
Mm,
or my religious beliefs if I take this vaccine. Employers really risk running themselves into trouble if they then question um, too deeply how genuine and sincere that employee's beliefs actually are.
yeah. Yeah. And also, like, we have to think about the majority of other people are thinking at the same time. So even though it's a right on the employee side, in the same way, it's not right on the whole community. It's like one person saying, I'm not taking the vaccine on it. But you have to think about like what other people are thinking on the same. Let's say like 100 employee in the same company working together. They seeing each other in the same desk, they're working and everything. And 99 of them like already got vaccination and one person is not doing it. That's kind of like another thing comes to like for employer as well, like there is safety issue. One is not believing, probably wherever the reason is. Some people not believing in the vaccination, some people religious issues, then some go another something, they're not trusting the whole medication itself. And then 99% of them employees, they probably gonna tell their boss or employer, like, look, we got all vaccination, why this person is not doing it? So how someone like employer can react to that?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, so uh, at least here in the States, the vaccination status is treated as a confidential medical record. So
Mhm.
your coworkers may not know. Like, I work in an office with, I don't know, 50 other people. I don't know which of my coworkers are vaccinated or not
Right.
vaccinated.
Okay.
Um, so we just don't know. That said, employers are certainly within their rights if they
Yeah.
want to mandate the vaccine and say, we believe, as a matter of workplace safety, everybody should be vaccinated.
Mhm.
That is something an employer can do, and collect, as long as they maintain it confidentially, can then collect vaccination status from employees and then enforce that as a work rule, just like they do with attendance or smoking or drinking or fighting or bad language or whatever.
Yeah.
They can then enforce that like any other work rule and say, you got to be fully vaccinated to work here, and if you're not, you can't work here. The only exceptions being religion, which we talked about, or
Mhm.
um, employees' physical or mental impairments, like legally protected disabilities. If you have a doctor's note that says, Johnny can't get vaccinated because Johnny has this autoimmune disorder or whatever,
Yeah.
an employer would have to consider and accommodate that as well.
Is that like an employer can fire someone if they don't want to take in vaccination? Is the kind of
Cor-
rules that, yeah,
Yeah, correct. As long as you have an equally applied work rule
yeah.
that, applies across the board to everybody, which is perfectly within an employer's right to do. Yeah, you can
Mm,
certainly fire someone who chooses not to get vaccinated.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing this. So we understand right now what kind of dispute normally happens in the corporate world. So right now, like, let's talk about how we can treat our employee properly, because you probably have a team for your law firm. Also, you looked at big companies, like you mentioned, you work with 1,000+ employees in the companies. So how do you actually treat your employees where we don't get any lawsuit, and same way we can maintain the team and the atmosphere and everything, keeping them happy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of things go into the equation. One of them is just this idea of fairness, this idea of the golden rule: treat others as you would want to be treated, or what I and some others call the platinum rule, which is treat others as they would want to be treated.
Yeah.
If you kind of meet people where they want to be, that solves, I think, 90+% of these problems. So I think that kind of idea of whether you call it the golden rule or fairness or
Mm.
reasonableness of behavior or whatever, I think that's a key component of it. Documentation and notice is another key component. I think where a lot of employers get themselves in trouble is where they kind of out of the blue, an issue becomes an
Yeah.
issue when an employee has no notice. An employee is going along working for 2 years. Everything is like, they think everything's hunky dory. They get, they've been working for a year. They get a annual performance appraisal. They get,
Yeah.
decent marks or good marks, couple of area, maybe do this a little better, do that a little better, but everything is going along fine. And then like out of the blue, they get you're on a performance plan. And if you don't
Mm.
immediately improve, we're going to fire you, or you're fired or whatever. And so it's where issues come out of left field and take employees by surprise. That's where employees start looking for other reasons why an employer is taking a particular action when this
Yeah.
caught them completely off guard. And that's when they start looking at characteristics protected that the law prohibits an employer from acting on behalf of. So things like race, sex, sexual
Mm.
orientation, age, religion, national origin, disability. Those are at least here in the U.S., those are the characteristics that the law, employee characteristics that the law protects. And when something you think you're doing a great job because no one's told you otherwise, and all of a sudden you are put on a final warning or fired completely out of the blue, you
Yeah.
start thinking, who did I piss off and why? Or is it something else completely? Like, is it my race? Is it my sexual orientation? Is it my age?
Mm.
Whatever. And then what angers me is when I then come in after the fact and I have to go and then defend one of these decisions. I asked for the personnel file, and
Yeah.
it's like, it's a blank piece of paper. There's like nothing there. And I'm like, so where's all the notes that the supervisor made about all the things that Jimmy did wrong, or where's the warnings, or
Yeah.
where's where's an Outlook, where's a calendar invite for a meeting where you can
Mm.
say, at least on this date, we sat him down and talked to him, and there's like nothing. And I'm like, well, I can't defend this. You
Yeah.
gotta have reasons, you gotta have justification. I mean, we have what's called at-will employment, which means you can fire anyone at any reason for any time, as long as the time's not illegal or the reason's not illegal. But if you don't have a reason, people are going to look for one. You just don't fire
Yeah.
good employees for no reason. You don't stay in business if you have a revolving door of good employees. That's a quick way to run your business out of business. So if I need to have like something I can point to say, this is why Jimmy was let go, and these are the dates that it was explained to him,
Yeah.
so that so when I'm talking to Jimmy in a deposition or in court, I can walk him through and he can agree with me that, yeah, he understood that he was a bad performer on this date, or he did this wrong, or he stole or did whatever. But
Yeah. You need kind of proof. Yeah.
without that
Documentation.
documentation, it makes my job almost impossible to do.
And is that happen like oftentimes? Like there is a blank piece of paper and no record of employees' progression and everything.
More often than I would like, yeah. And it really, I mean, it's the larger the organization, the more systems and controls they have in
Mm.
place. So things like that typically don't happen. Where I typically experience it more is the smaller the size of the organization I'm working
Yeah.
with, then it's either because people are, and again, I don't think it's out of bad intent. It's out of what causes things like that are things like, um, I'm wearing 6 different hats,
Yeah.
and when I'm disciplined, and when I need to discipline, um, Janie for what she did wrong on this particular day, I
Mhm.
came out of that discussion and immediately had to go do X, Y, and Z because there were all these fires I had to put
Yeah.
out, and then it just falls off the radar. So it's not a it's not a it's more it's a sin of omission, not a sin of commission, but it's
Mhm.
still a sin, and it's a sin I got to deal with, and it makes it
Yeah.
very difficult to, yeah. Judges and juries like documentation. They really
Yeah.
do. We've all been, for better or for worse, we've all been conditioned by like Law and Order. And if it's that, and that's, I mean, that's not real life, but that's
Yeah.
for when you're arguing a case to a jury or presenting a case to a jury, that's their understanding of the legal system is what they see. They know, like, they know the OJ trial, they know,
Mm.
Law and Order. They know what they see on TV unless they operate in the system. And so we've been conditioned, we've been conditioned to expect proof.
Yeah.
All the high profile cases have, like, the OJ trial had DNA evidence. Law and Order, we always see like DNA. Like, jurors want to see hard proof of things. And when they don't see that, it makes my job. Um, we just don't take people's word, even though they, put their hand on a Bible and swear to tell the truth,
Yeah.
without something to corroborate that. Jurors just don't believe it.
Yeah. And like for those who listeners, like we mostly entrepreneurs, and our subscribers mostly for entrepreneurs. So they probably small to medium sized businesses and to have the HR team. So mostly the HR team, the documentation, all of them, like if someone's like did XYZ or something, the documentation is there. But a small company like my company, like we're 13 people, we don't have any HR team. So if someone has to deal with me or my CEO managing and everything. So most of the time we don't have like any kind of documentation. So those who's listening, if you want to advise them like any kind of like a lawsuit for employer to avoid, like what type of like the steps we need to follow in terms of like avoiding the kind of lawsuits.
In terms of like avoiding getting sued,
Yeah, like
well,
for documentation or something
yeah,
for like about employees.
the only way to guarantee you're not going to get sued is to not go into business. If you go into business, unfortunately, that's one of the
Yeah,
risks of doing business, is that you might have to call someone like me to bail you out of some trouble. That's just the nature of the beast. Yeah, but documentation is one solid step to help protect yourself. Notice is a solid step to help protect yourself. Giving employees opportunities to correct behavior.
yeah,
Something, I mean, some workplace sins are inexcusable and non-forgivable,
hmm,
and they warrant an immediate termination of employment. If an employee shows up high at work, they don't get a second chance. If an employee assaults a coworker, they don't get a second chance. If they
yeah,
steal, they don't get a second chance. If they commit like egregious sexual harassment, they grab a coworker in a sexual manner, force themselves on someone, something like that, they don't get a second chance. So there's certain sins that are just, I refer to as, like a capital offense. Like, that's it,
yeah,
one and done. That's it, you're out. But for other problems in the workplace, you come in late, um, you're not producing at a high enough volume, you are argumentative, or maybe have a bad attitude, or some
hmm,
other things that, with some direction and counseling, should be fixable. You should, in most cases, give employees the opportunity to fix those problems, instead of just having a quick trigger and saying, well, you're supposed to make 100 widgets a day.
yeah,
You've been here a month. You're only making 85 widgets a day. You're out the door. Go find yourself another job. We need to give employees counseling and direction and some help to assist them in meeting our expectations as employers
hmm,
in how they do their job. And if you give the employee opportunities and chances to improve with counseling, with assistance, with discipline, if you're not seeing the work towards the improvement, then termination might be the only option. If they're
yeah,
not meeting your expectations after opportunities, then maybe termination at that point is the option. But without giving employees the chance to improve themselves, I think, again, you're inviting a lawsuit when you go from like 0 to 10
yeah,
the first time an employee makes a mistake. And I mean, it's bad for your business too. You don't want a revolving door of employees. You don't want, every month you have to, hire to replace 20% of your workforce because you're terminating 20%
hmm,
because they're not meeting your expectations for whatever reason. I mean, companies get reputations. It's too easy these days on Indeed and Glassdoor and, LinkedIn and other websites for
Yeah.
employers to really pick up a lousy reputation of what it's like to work for a particular business. And, if you're constantly getting, 1-star reviews from current and former employees, you're going to end up only being able to hire 1-star employees
Yeah.
because they're the only ones that are going to want to work for you, because the employees of value are going to go work for employers of choice.
Mhm.
So it's incumbent upon employers, I think, not to have that revolving door. And one of the better ways to do that is by, working with your employees. Employees are an investment. Every time you hire an employee, you have to view it as an investment. It's an investment of your time, your human capital. Nobody comes in to your workplace as a polished diamond. The goal is to get them there, but most people don't come in that way. So it's an investment of time and human capital to do that, and why you want to, flush that investment down the toilet without giving it sufficient time to bear out. It always just confuses me angers me why companies do that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much for that. And there is like make a lot of differences since we working remote now. Everyone's working from like a home most of the time. So is that like a for reduce on like a discrimination and like harassment or any kind of issues because everyone working remote and the productivity increase?
It's an interesting question. You would think that issues like harassment would decrease with employees working from home because
Yeah.
we're not seeing each other on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
I think the opposite might actually be true. Where it's just a different kind of harassment. So
Mhm.
we're not having that face-to-face interaction, but by the same token, we're also allowed to hide behind anonymity is not the right word because we know each other, but it is still a kind of an obscuring of that human contact. I think it's easier if you're going to say something inappropriate
Yeah.
or be mean to someone or say something offensive. I think it's easier to do it behind the distance of your keyboard than face to face with somebody. And so I think while it might seem at first blush to make more sense that if we're not seeing each other every day, these issues should lessen. I actually think there's a potential for them to increase because I think we have a greater propensity to kind of lose sense of kind of what's business appropriate when we can hide behind the safety of these things or
Yeah.
the distance of these things.
Yeah, interesting. So yes, we are running out of time for this podcast. And thank you so much for a valuable lesson and sharing your expertise on the topic. So those who's listening, if anyone wants to work with you or reach out to you, hire your company, like how they can find you.
Yeah, so the law firm is Wickens, Herzer, Panza. We're in the Cleveland, Ohio area, but I will work with companies anywhere in the U.S. You can find the firm at wickenslaw.com. That's WICKENS law.com. I also write Monday through Friday on my blog about employment law issues, and you can find me at ohioemployerlawblog.com. And then on the socials, it's Jon Henman on Twitter. It's Jonathan Henman because it was already a Jon Henman when I signed up for LinkedIn. So it's Jonathan Henman on LinkedIn, but no one calls me Jonathan except my mom when she's mad at me, and then someone when they're typing typing my full name into the search bar in LinkedIn. But I don't hide. If you literally Google Jon Henman employment lawyer, you'll find numerous ways to connect with me, and I'm happy to connect with any of your listeners, business owners, entrepreneurs, or whomever, to talk through the employment related issues they're having.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for coming to the show and share your valuable lessons and also your expertise. I really appreciate. I wish you good luck with your career and business and have a wonderful week.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening. So this is a wrap. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and talk to you soon.